WLCTV is taking you live on a journey through the streets of Sault Ste. Marie with community leaders sharing insights and aspirations while showcasing our wonderful community and whatever we may encounter along the way. Join us in this fun adventure and enjoy the ride. So here we are again. Julie Hryniewicz is with us, homelessness advocate, and she's been at this for quite a while. So tell us, as a former OPP officer, how did that influence this direction?
I'm not sure if it actually did directly. I left the OPP a long time ago, many years ago, and I ended up into social services roles in addition to educational roles in particular. And over the years, especially starting in 2021, I was working with an agency that along with people experiencing homelessness, and I realized that there was a service gap. The neighborhood resource center that was on Gore Street, we might drive by that a bit later, had closed, and there was a very long period of time until the new community resource center opened.
So there was a void.
There was a void. There was a gap. And I tried to advocate for a new drop-in center in the middle of that gap. And when that didn't happen, I opened my own, and it was called Lodge 137. So that's kind of how it started.
Right. You were the founder of Lodge 137.
Yep.
And that housed several people. And you had success?
So it wasn't housed. Initially, it was just drop-in center only. And then I ended up buying an old church building around the corner from the first space. And we will do a bit more of a drive-by on that going downtown. And in that space, I ran a drop-in center, but I also separately rented some rooms outside of drop-in center hours. So it was kind of a culmination of, two different things. And now I have a separate location, two actually. I just took over another building that will be effective January 1st, where I provide room rentals with support.
Right.
And some of those individuals came from homelessness or urgent housing.
You took it to a different level.
Yep. There were actually three phases of my original plan, which was drop-in center, room rentals, and then moving people on to their own bachelor or one bedrooms.
And a lot of this is developed because you have a different vision than our normal, let's say the people that run our health community, right?
I'm not sure that it's different from the people running it, but it's probably different from the general public. Okay. I think the general public, there are a lot of perceptions about, let's just arrest everybody, force them into treatment, get them well, and get them a job. And from experience, I can tell you that the process isn't that easy, and it's not really wise to think that we're going to police our way out of this or force people into health and wellness. That just doesn't happen. So I think we're going to drive, and maybe we'll start talking about some of the places as we go by, and maybe our first step could be to pop into the parking lot of the Community Resource Center that's located at the corner of Wellington and East Street. Because I really do feel that that's kind of the hub of where everything's happening right now.
And that's the Community Resource Center, is
that
correct?
Yes. So on the front of the building.
And that's a relatively new establishment,
Yep.
Right?
So it's just over a year. I believe they opened in November of 2023. And it's located at 721 Wellington Street East. Now that building is the old Sacred Heart School and is really primarily the men's shelter, men's transition bridge units, as well as a community drop-in center. So on the third floor of the building, they have men who rent rooms, and they have shared kitchens and living spaces, so they can come and go throughout the day. On the second floor, they have the men's shelter that used to be at the Verde in the West End. So the men's shelter has, I believe, 22 cots or beds that people can check in at 4:30 in the evening. And then on the lower level, Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 is the drop-in center.
Now tell me, is that enough space to take care of?
Not at all. So the most recent statistic in October of this year, 2024.
So you should finish my sentence.
Oh, sorry.
Take care of all the people.
Take care of all the people.
That are, you know.
Yeah. And definitely no, because 421 people were identified in the PIT count, which is a point-in-time count that was just done a couple of months ago. And the shelter fits 22 men. The bridge units have 22 rooms. Pauline's place, I believe, has 30 beds, including some of their transition units. So regardless, we have less than 100 shelter beds and 421 people experiencing homelessness.
At least.
At least. That's very minimal.
And it depends on the time of the year as well, right?
Yep, for sure. So in the winter time, obviously, it's much harder for people to what we call rough sleep outside or in stairwells, encampments, vestibules. Some people are still doing it. There's still people living in tents. If you can imagine, if you're looking around right now where we have snow everywhere.
Well, when we did our first episode, it was a blizzard.
It was whiteout. We could barely see. So we were looking for some people. Last week we were looking for a fella named Daniel, who I had interviewed on Gore Street. The good news is, the day that we did our first show, I ended up leaving some messages at a couple of places, at the Community Resource Center and at Soya, and Daniel did call me back. He indicated that at least now he has found a place to stay.
So that's fantastic.
I didn't probe further because the place was closing and he was getting something to eat real quick, so I didn't want to hold him up, but that was really exciting news.
And that's one less soul on our streets, correct?
It is. Now, I don't know.
And that's important.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if that's a temporary situation or a permanent situation, but this is a really cool idea. I love what you're doing, by the way. But you know what it does remind me of is Cash Cab.
Yeah.
And you said, I don't know what that is.
I don't know what that is.
So there's a show that I haven't seen in years, but just the other day I saw it again, and basically some guy drives around in a car that they call Cash Cab, and people come in, usually 2 or 3 of them, and they answer questions, like trivia questions.
Oh, and they win
money. So do you have cash? Yeah, so we could play Cash Cab.
That's interesting.
This could be a trivia about homelessness in Sault Ste. Marie.
See, this is the amalgamation of over 30 years of broadcasting, all put together in one idea. And, you know, I've been monitoring a lot of these stringers out west where there still is a lot of transparency, and you still can get a police scanner, and you can hear what's really happening in your community. So these are news people, you know, they're sometimes called night crawlers, and they go out and about and they gather news.
Wow.
So when you get up in the morning, there's your news. That's guys like me, right?
Okay.
So this is an amalgamation of all that and 30 plus years of, you know, working in the broadcast industry.
And you're a self-professed night hawk, so that might work perfectly.
Well, it's interesting
roam
because
the streets at night.
Last night I did take a drive because I was setting up some of this equipment, and in my drive I went down Queen, and there were 2 people that were pushing their carts. Yeah. So
still at night, and I don't know how you push your carts on the sidewalks.
That was way after 11 o'clock, by the way. So, so the problems exist. Like, it's not
for sure
going away, right?
And so I think what I found over the last few years dealing with individuals experiencing homelessness is that in the winter or whenever the weather is bad, many of them just stay hidden out at the drug houses.
Right.
Everything's close by. They can stay in the hallways, in the stairwells, in the apartment, going in and out. And that's not helpful. It's not helpful if we're trying to get people healthy. So, you know, some of the places we'll drive by include things like clinics that offer medications such as methadone, Suboxone, Sublocade, which are a substitution or a way of people to get well if they have some kind of dependency on opioids. So honestly, that's been the most helpful thing for anyone who I know has become healthier, because if you're coming off of fentanyl, which is a synthetic opioid, it tends to be accessible because it's, you know, the clinics are located primarily in the downtown core, and someone does not have to attend treatment or withdrawal management in order to start treatment for a dependence on opioids. So I've made sort of a little tally of a number of people who have become well or housed.
Right.
Some of them are even working right now.
Fantastic.
And almost every single one of them ended up transitioning from being dependent on opioids and experiencing homelessness by using methadone, Suboxone, or Sublocade. So Sublocade is an injection, and methadone or Suboxone are generally a drink that they have to take daily at the pharmacy, or if they're really dependable, they can get what are called carries to bring the medication home.
And I didn't know all this. I moved back to the city here, and I was picking up my parents' mom and dad's prescription, and I could see these two look like grape juice fountains in the back there in the pharmacy.
Grape juice.
And I'm going, wow, this is like a Wilco in the old days, or the Kmart. I go, wait, can I get a drink?
Fountain drink. Yeah.
And she says, no, that's not. That's not for you. That's for people that are fighting off addictions.
Yeah.
And I was floored. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Yeah.
And honestly, to me, it's a miracle drug. I think the problem, though, is that there's a perception that you can become dependent on that too. And there are a number of people who are on, say, methadone for years and years. But some people are on methadone because they have a back injury or some kind of surgery that happened, or they have, kind of a major issue that they're dealing with for pain. So methadone is not just for individuals who are coming off of a dependency to substances. It can be for pain management. So there are a lot of misconceptions that are happening.
About that. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yes, so if you see people going into a clinic and they may be on a prescription for methadone, they may never have had substance use disorder. They may be there because they were in a motor vehicle collision and they suffered, some kind of injury that gives them permanent pain. Just up here on the left, we're going to turn into the Resource Center before we hit East Street. So we are on Wellington Street East, and we're just going to pop in and face the church here, if you don't mind. I don't want to put people onto camera, even though we're in public. It's probably going to be fairly quiet in the parking lot because it's so cold outside and messy and damp. So this building, they did a really beautiful job. I've been through all 3 levels of the building. And the Community Resource Center has been remodeled for several $1 million. We can go ahead over and park over here.
So this is the unit here. It's got 3 floors, 4 floors?
3 floors, and on that top level are those room rentals, or what they call bridge units. The second floor is the men's shelter, and the main level, or the lower level, is considered the Community Resource Center. And so there's a lot of activity here, especially weekdays. And anyone who's staying in the facility overnight, they will be coming in and out as well throughout the night. I know there's some restrictions for those who are in shelter.
So you want to run in here?
I'm not going to run in today because the last time I did that, I was gone for almost 20 minutes chatting with people. We did stop here last week and I left a message, but I ended up running into some former lodge members here because in the basement where the Community Resource Center is, they have medical clinics. So they have a nurse practitioner here. They have a doctor that comes in. They have computers. They have snacks. They have laundry, showers, things like that. So it is a really fabulous facility, even though my only beef is that it's not available currently 24/7 for a drop-in.
Okay.
Now, the goal is that if we get this Heart Hub funding, which is through the provincial government, they're supposed to announce it by the end of the year or early in the new year to find out which locations in Ontario were granted this funding. This funding would mean $6.3 million for each successful municipality over a 3-year period to provide services that are about addiction treatment, as well as, my understanding, services to support individuals experiencing homelessness and supportive housing.
The Heart House is or the Community Resource Center is included in it,
so
perhaps?
It hasn't been released publicly, but my belief, and I could be wrong, and I almost hope that I am wrong, because I would like to see a separate drop-in center location. However, I believe that because the Heart Hub funding isn't for capital investment, then it won't contribute to the building itself. It's for operations. I believe they're going to put it here. So the Community Resource Center will likely become the source of the Heart Hub funding if we are successful in receiving it.
But in the end, we need more facilities, correct?
We do. So honestly, if I was to wave a wand, I would love this whole building to be converted to supportive housing the way they're doing the third floor here. I think that what they're doing for the transition units is fabulous. I've heard nothing but positive things for these transition units. Because shelter, for instance, when we stopped in last week and I went downstairs, I'm grateful that they were able to allow their belongings here. They had bags full with their names written on them, so anyone staying in shelter could bring their belongings down to the Community Resource Center, which was a problem when we were first setting it up. I thought they were going to refuse to do that. But unfortunately they have to close up their bed and leave for the day and then come back at 4:30 and stand in line and wait for a bed. I'm not sure that that's really helpful to make people stable. So I would love to see more transition units here and then a drop-in center elsewhere that's open 24 hours a day. So if the Heart Hub funding comes through, hopefully 24/7 will be a drop-in center.
So wouldn't it be fantastic, though, if it was just one building that did it all?
It would be. However, here are some problems with that.
Yes, because of the transitioning part.
So the transitioning part, so when you have people who are living on site and a drop-in center, I experienced that when I purchased the church, it's very difficult to keep it separate, because then people who are starting to get stable and be well,
right,
and maybe say they're on methadone because they had a dependency on opioids, they're then mingling with people who are at the drop-in center,
right,
who are currently actively using. So it's way more difficult to mix them. And from my experience, that didn't work. So now I call them my guys. My guys are over in a separate house, right, where they are stable. I mean, some of them have been with me over a year and a half. It's so amazing. And I'm just grateful to be dealing with them, because no matter where they came from in the urgent circumstances, housing wise or addiction wise, everyone is stable, and that's working. So if we mix it together, it's probably not going to work to have everyone in the same building. So, and also there's so much activity 24/7. How do you really allow the people who are staying in transition units to be calm and peaceful when there's so many people coming and going? So if someone who's staying in a transition unit goes out to have a cigarette, they're now mingling with people who are perhaps under the influence, because this is considered a low barrier shelter, which means you can come in even if you're under the influence of a substance. It's not supposed to be where you're permitted to use substances, but they can't deny you just because you're under the influence. Okay.
So we're going to move on, right?
Yeah, let's move.
You got a few sites you want to show us.
Yeah,
but,
let's drive around.
Just recently, you brought to my attention, as I did, I think last week, was about our premier, Doug Ford. But Doug Ford has changed. You said some of the wording that you read the article.
So after our last show, there was an article that came out that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, is going to clamp down on encampments. Basically, idea is that's not acceptable. We're not going to have this. They were talking previously about forced or involuntary treatment for individuals who are experiencing substance use disorder. And I didn't like any of the wording when I read the headline. The only thing that came out, though, wait, there's a vehicle.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough one.
The snowbanks are terrible here.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to go nice and slow to get out of here. There's lots of traffic. But there was a mention of $75.5 million that the government was committed to spending towards shelters or services for individuals experiencing homelessness or substance use disorder. So, if that's true and this passes, they are going to be clamping down on encampments. Now, that's easy to say.
But it's $75 million across the province?
Oh, yeah. So it's not going to be much. They said there's 400 municipalities across the province. Over 300 people expressed interest in the Heart Hub funding, 300 municipalities. And oh, sorry, before, as we're passing, just keep going, but down on this street, on Brock Street, is the new, I call it Taj Mahal for social services. That's the housing department, Ontario Works. And across in the old housing building that used to be housing for Ontario social services here in town is now going to be the second division of the police force. So they're doing work opening that up, but I don't think it's officially open. They did do a ribbon cutting,
They're
I
doing
understand,
some
but
renovating perhaps?
I'm sure they're getting it, more appropriate for
What about that building by the mall? I thought they were transitioning that into a police station.
Well, that's been a police station for a while,
Okay.
like a little division. I've never honestly ever seen anyone from the public go in or out of there. I know that there are probably officers that were working in that space, but it was certainly not a place where people could, comfortably go in and out.
And speaking of people having access to services such as that, our homeless population, if they're living in the core downtown, I don't think they have access to a cell phone. Most poor people don't. But let alone, I don't think there's payphones anywhere in the city anymore, are there?
Well, I have not seen a payphone in a lot of years.
And shouldn't that be one of those services that is mandatory?
Yeah. So,
Like
in
if you're-
addition to that, don't you think a washroom should be mandatory?
Yes.
And there
definitely.
isn't. There is not one designated 24/7 washroom in downtown Sault Ste. Marie. So if someone wants to use a washroom and they're experiencing homelessness,
So we're
and it's
heading down
after 4:30, yeah, we're going to head down. Let's go
Wellington?
straight down Wellington, and we'll pass some of the services. Up here on the left, we're going to be coming up to a building that I just had an offer on that didn't end up going through.
And that building would have housed far more.
Well, it wasn't housed, so this would have been a drop-in center.
drop-in
Yes,
center.
there's so much confusion
yes,
between
yes.
shelter and drop-in center.
Okay.
Shelter, in my mind, is where people sleep overnight
Right.
in a bed. A drop-in center is where people can sleep on a resting chair.
Okay.
So I had put an offer on the building up here, and it's now sold to someone else, and it was very heartbreaking. In order for me to have purchased that building, they wanted to put our house up as collateral in addition to the building, or I needed $113,000 cash. Now I was able to scrape together almost 50, but I couldn't do. Right here on the left was this building, and it's now sold, and the sign is
Am
gone.
I going the right way?
You're going to go straight. So sorry, get in this middle lane. So we're kind of at the corner of Gore Street right now and Wellington, and we're going to go straight up ahead. We're going to see on the left Pauline's Place Shelter. Now, Pauline's Place will house youth over the age of 16 or over. They'll also house females, and they'll house families who are experiencing homelessness. There's been nothing but great things that have come out of Pauline's Place, and they even stepped up during the pandemic when they had to expand shelter services. They took males and females at one point. Anyway, so definitely there are a number of services that are at work right now dealing with the population base, even though there's still not enough. Right? So if we could just kind of times 10 every
Now-
service that's
Now,
helping.
I'm curious, has the demographics, our community is evolving here in the city. You can see there's a lot of new Canadians. Has the demographics shifted?
I believe, at least from my experience, the food insecurity has shifted with our newcomers to Canada. There are a number of people accessing food banks and thrift stores that are newcomers to Canada, but not as much the homelessness, at least from my experience.
We haven't seen that yet.
Not yet,
we hope not
even
to.
though it's coming.
We hope not to, though.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So this whole building at the corner is now, it is Pauline's Place. It's been here for a number of years.
The whole building, the whole
building. And they have also transition units for females in there, so sort of like those room rentals. The only issue with Pauline's Place is it's not considered a low barrier shelter.
So what do you call this district?
I call it the underpass area, but there's no specific name for it. On the right here is Helping Hands, and this is a thrift store that people can go into, and you can also make donations, but only during proper hours. So make sure you call and make sure, because they were having a real problem with people dumping donations. we are going to make a left on Carmen's Way. So yeah, they operate out of here. And on Carmen's Way, we're going to head over to the soup kitchen just so we can show where the soup kitchen is located. And what's exciting is the soup kitchen is now starting to open up for some drop-in meals, whereas it's been takeout meals only since COVID. So this is a transition, because I'm a huge advocate for, if we're cutting off all services for people experiencing homelessness, to actually sit down and have a meal. And from COVID on, the only place they could come in and sit was the lodge. And we were open from January of 2022 to November of 2023, even though we had to massively scale back our hours in 2023. It was personally funded with amazing sponsors and amazing volunteers and people who would make donations and volunteer their time. And I had students from Sault College, Algoma University, and the CTS Canadian Career College who were volunteers, some of them doing their placement hours for their school programs. So in case anyone wants to do a program, you're going to go up ahead and turn right at the next...
A Cathcart or?
The next one. We'll go on to Queen Street. Or Albert, actually. Make the right on Albert.
Albert.
Okay, so yeah, just up here on the right, we're going to turn right.
Oh, look at that beautiful bridge.
But look at the vast area that someone has to walk around to access services.
Yeah, that's
and
the
especially
distance.
if they're carrying all their belongings. Oh, that's good. Good of you. Look at you. All these driving rules that you're following so diligently.
Well, I'm
Excellent.
sitting beside a former officer.
It's not like I'm going to call the police on you or anything, but I'm really appreciative of your
I thought that's what
very
we do.
cautious driving.
That's the Canadian way, isn't it?
Okay, so look at the weather, look at the sidewalks, the streets. How are people supposed to access all of these services that are so vast?
In the East End, West
So
End.
a lot of times people living in this area, which is more or less considered Jamestown is going to access services like the soup kitchen. In the east, people are going to access the community resource center more readily. So just because there's one service doesn't always mean that everybody is accessing it all the time.
Right.
So we're going to turn where that van just pulled out.
And is this the only soup kitchen?
This is technically no. This is the only one that's called the soup kitchen. Vincent Place on Albert Street East
So
also
that's
has
more
a
in
meal.
in the core of the city,
That's
right?
correct. So this is the only one that's west. So we're going to turn in here. And this is near Spadoni's Furniture, right in the west. And so there's lots of
So there's a
activity.
lot
Let's
of
not
people-
pull in all the way
No,
because
we'll do a 360
they're
here.
lining up to do their probably takeout lunches. So they're
So
probably
that's what
lining up.
That's what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, let's turn around.
Yeah.
You're going to have to kind of back in and go back in this
Yeah, same direction.
same way. So yes, people are here accessing. Let's be careful. This fella's walking behind.
Yeah.
So people are going to come here and pick up their bagged lunches, even though I thought it was this week that they were going to have a sit-down meal for Christmas. So I'm really excited to hear that there's going to be some sit-down meals again at the Soup Kitchen Community Center in Jamestown. I think there's so much potential down here for more services, but honestly,
There's a lot of apartment buildings.
a lot of
here, I see
apartment
it.
buildings.
I
Yeah,
see
there's
it.
a social services building right here. And a lot of them are, geared to income. I've been in a lot of the units. Some of them are very nice, very well kept.
Should I go straight?
Oh, you can. Go straight, and we'll go straight up Bay Street and work our way back down, actually. We'll go down.
So this
Wait.
is kind of like, I don't know, some of these buildings are from the 50s, I think.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I don't know the exact year, but they have been around for a very long time. And
except for, the apartment buildings themselves, but you got these other ones that are, the old brick ones, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a lot of the original structure in Sault Ste. Marie.
I believe, yeah.
And of course, up ahead is the bridge. Now we're going to pass by when we turn left.
And the reason that these apartments were all built was because of the steel plant. At one time,
Probably.
they used to hire tens of thousands, right?
Oh, for sure. My dad used to work at the steel plant a long time ago.
My dad as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of dads did,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
I'll go with steel, actually.
Yeah. So it's interesting, as I'm driving around, there are so many buildings that I looked at for sale to put a drop-in center. And it's been a really uphill battle, that's for sure. Very, very stressful. A lot of buildings are in terrible condition. A lot of them are not affordable because I'm always trying to figure out how can I support the building myself without having to ask for donations. So I set up the first lodge as a social enterprise by renting rooms. So that would have worked, except that mixing room rentals, with the drop-in was difficult. Up here on the right, you can just keep going, but the green building is the old Verdi. So this is where they did a temporary men's shelter. It was rented by social services and run by Canadian Mental Health Association. And that shelter was transitioned over to the first building we saw at the Community Resource Center. The neighbors didn't like it very much, for sure. But at least at the Community Resource Center now, there's quite a large fence. And in the wintertime, the bank sort of covers a lot of what's going on. A lot of people were frustrated because there were individuals hanging out on the street right in front.
Not
after
my neighborhood,
4:30
not in my
evening.
neighborhood, right?
Yeah,
we
and I
hear that
mean,
all the
nobody
time.
wants it in their neighborhood, but what else are you going to do? If you don't want people spilling all over the street who are experiencing homelessness, you have to have an alternate location for them to go.
Exactly.
And that's always been my point with the resource center. People could come in and sleep for 6 hours at a time when we were open sort of full-time during the weekdays and have a sleep on a chair.
How many people did you have that could take that rest in the chair?
So we served over 300 unique clients, most of them who were regulars. Now, one day we had almost 120 people come through the door in the same day.
Wow, that's in a 24-hour period?
That was during a 6-hour period.
6-hour period?
In 6 hours, over 120 people in one day came through.
Wow.
With this population, it's all about trust. So in order to establish trust with this group, a lot of them like the anonymity of coming in, right? Mm-hmm. So a drop-in center, different than shelter, because in shelter they usually have to provide identification or their name at least in order to be able, because the shelter has to be compensated for their stay, right? Mm-hmm. So oftentimes, they're going to require your name. They also check to see if you've been trespassed. So one of the issues with having one big space is that sometimes people are trespassed, or sometimes there's no communication orders between two individuals because they've had some kind of a criminal involvement and they're not allowed to associate. So what does that mean?
It makes it quite complex.
Right, and what it means is that the people who you are seeing rough sleeping or constantly chronically homeless have oftentimes been banned from the shelters or have been banned from receiving social housing because they have arrears. Well, not always. Sometimes it is a fault of their own. But even then, are we permanently committing people to homelessness if they never have an opportunity to kind of, turn things around? So we're passing Station Mall right now. What we know is that anyone who can, manage to not get trespassed from the mall for purposes of dragging their stuff. Yeah, it's a place for people to come and use the washroom. But unfortunately, they usually don't allow people coming in and dragging their belongings around. Well, if you and I were experiencing homelessness and we only had a cart full or a container full or a wagon full of things, we're probably not going to want to part with them. And unfortunately, the second people fall asleep or they're using drugs and nodding off, their stuff is getting stolen. So their belongings are so important to them. And as a matter of fact, I have a half of an entire huge basement room in my location where I rent to my guys that is still storing things that belong to people as far back as January of 2022. So if people came in with their things like photographs, identification, copies of anything that's important, I still have that stuff all stored. So I always say to everyone, contact me if you need any of those belongings. It's always exciting when I'm able to turn over 4 bins of stuff to someone who finally has obtained housing. And that doesn't always happen, obviously. So our goal is to get everyone housed, but even if we had 400 or 500 bachelor units right now, if we put people in, Rick, a lot of them are not going to be successful in their housing if they don't have support. This is a complicated issue.
I think it's important. Like, every human being needs a different. I don't know how to say it. There's not one blanket thing that could solve everyone's issues.
You're right. We're going to turn left at East Street. As soon as you see the library on the right, we're going to make a left.
So my thought, and it's called breaking the chain, and it's to remove yourself from that area, perhaps that place of birth, and the traps, that got you addicted and, into all that, right here?
Yep. So we're going to go left here. And I just want to point out some of the clinics just so that people are aware. So we're going to make a left on Queen Street. But up ahead on East, we have the Indigenous Friendship Center. Over here on the right on Queen Street is Ontario Aboriginal Housing. We have the RAM Clinic that's run by Sioux Area Hospital. And that is a place that people can go when they're first starting their journey to get, say, off of a dependency to any substances. There's a clinic up here called Recovery North.
Recovery North, I see.
Yep. Nogda Windeman is also here if anyone has children who are in care and they are Indigenous. So that one of their offices there on Queen Street. And up ahead, there is the OACT clinic, which is another clinic that provides management for pain or methadone or coming off of substances. And then I always say the Sioux Community Career Center, but when you're looking at coming out of this cycle, it does take a while for people to get a job, but when they're ready, I really love the Sioux Community Career Center here on the left. So it's across from it says Sioux Clinic, but it's the OACT Clinic, and then the Sioux Community Career Center. They help with resumes, and they have job boards, and they have computer use and printing, and you can talk with a counselor for, career choices. On March Street here at 123 March Street, in this big white building, they also have another clinic that can help with addiction management. So a lot of people don't realize that even if you can't get into the treatment like the Northway Wellness Center,
there are resources.
There are resources that you can start immediately. The problem is when people are experiencing homelessness, it's very difficult to get to a pharmacy every day, which is what you have to do when you're taking treatment for opioids, unless you have carries. Now on the right, on the left, Salvation Army, before we get there, yeah. So on the left, and that's where you'll see a lot of people lining up.
And we're on Elgin Street, Elgin and Queen.
Elgin is where the Salvation Army is for meals and pickups. Canadian Mental Health is on our right, and behind it is Club 84.
Indian Friendship Center?
That's an old one. And that may be actually, that looks like that could be a Memo-Wasing office, but I'm not sure if it's still functional. Then, of course, we have Ross Romano was on Elgin, Terry Sheehan on Queen, ODSP, and then we have John Howard Society across the street from ODSP office. We have another clinic called Road to Recovery.
Newspapers right here.
Yeah, that's right. That's Sioux Today on the right. Obviously the GFL Gardens on the left. Okay, we're gonna go down and then we're gonna make a right onto Gore Street. Now, on the right here, even though we're not gonna drive down Dennis Street, is the new Youth Wellness Hub. I mean, I believe it's been functioning for several months, but it is a remarkable facility on Dennis. So it's youth, generally ages 16 to 25. And it's a drop-in center space. They have tons of programming. It's so remarkable. I believe they're serving 300-400 youth or more by now. So that's really exciting. So it provides more focused care on the youth with a lot of referrals as to where the youth would go when they're struggling. And some of them are not experiencing homelessness, but it's a safe place for them to go and to access workers and...
Gore Street, right?
Yeah, so Gore Street. Our very first lodge building was here on the left at 137 Gore Street. It was exciting, actually, to be in this space, but we were only here for a couple of months. I did have an issue with the landlord, and I decided to end my lease. So where that red and blue and white sign is, that was our first location.
Okay, yeah.
Now, you know what? We're going to turn right.
Here. Yeah.
However, Grocer for Good is on the left, which is kind of a really cool grocery store that provides some of the staples. Soya is up here, Save Our Young Adults. They have a depot for having items like clothing and boots and things like that.
Right.
But they also have meals. They're open Tuesday and Thursday 11 to 2 and Saturday 11 to 2:45, I believe. This is our old lodge here on the right at 59 Albert Street East. It has not been accessed or used since I sold the building in January,
Oh, wow.
which is crazy because there's so many rooms in there for rental and they just never did anything with it. So I think it was kind of a victim of the out-of-town investor syndrome. Anyways, on the left up here we have Vincent Place.
Is there a food bank?
Yes, so right here on the left is Vincent Place that has a food bank. Mind you, I believe you might have to show ID for that. So that's one of the only issues. They used to have a meal where you can go sit, but now they have takeout meals. And they have a bit of a thrift store, or at least they did at one point. I'm stand corrected because I'm not sure if that's still in existence. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the things, but as you can see, a lot of services are located downtown.
Everything's in the core.
It's in the core,
Yeah.
and this is why we are, homelessness generally is visible. But as you can see today, we only saw a handful, less than a dozen people walking around.
Mm-hmm.
I saw them. I didn't want to point people out, but I saw individuals who I know are experiencing homelessness and substance use as we drove by. But unfortunately, this is not going to change unless we do something drastic, which is 24/7 care and supportive housing. And really, I believe supportive housing room rentals are the only way. If you have supportive housing apartments and someone is not stable, or like a motel room or whatever, that's not going to work if you don't have people or workers or volunteers going in and out regularly throughout each day. Because if you're not seeing with your own eyes the condition of apartments, if people are a bunch of them sleeping in one place, I had one guy sneaking people in through a window outside of security cameras into his room because he said, "It's not what you think, Julie. I was trying to help the homeless." Anyway, regardless, the point is that this is a very complex issue that requires compassion, empathy, and a massive amount of support services. I was willing to do it as a volunteer. I feel like I've been banging my head against a wall to kind of, open a drop-in center, but hopefully...
You're making a difference, right?
Well, I don't know that I am, but we're here educating. So this is the old Ontario Works building. I believe this is going to be the North Shore Tribal Council building now.
Right here on our left.
Yeah, so that building wasn't good enough for social services, but apparently it's good enough for someone else. And there's Taj Mahal there. And then I call at the other end of Brock Street is the Ivory Tower, where Sioux Council is located.
Do we need to stop in here?
No, that's okay. We're going to keep going. But yes, one of my locations where I have my guys and my room rentals is we just passed on Albert Street East. And my new location's actually in the East End in a really nice neighborhood. So we're going to work on, I have some students who are temporarily in there. And I have openings that will be coming in February and March. So I'm going to be hopefully setting up individuals to get into those room rentals with support. And what I do with those room rentals, I provide everything inclusive. All utilities, internet. They even get their own account on a Netflix profile.
Oh, wow.
And I provide laundry supplies, cleaning supplies. Everything is completely furnished, comes with beds, bedding, and I drive everyone for groceries once a week. If I'm out of town, I have other volunteers who do that. And we provide kind of that check-in to make sure they're healthy and that they're well and that their rooms are clean. And of course, when I was first in there, I was in there several days a week. Mm-hmm. And now things are... I barely have to be there because it's running so smoothly. So,
kind of like your show.
Oh, well, let's hope. Let's hope we're live. But I really want to congratulate you for doing this because it's such an exciting. Even if we're not live,
I think we didn't wait long enough. Like
Okay.
And I hit the button twice, so we may not be live. But if we're live, Hello, everybody.
Hello. And if not, we're sorry.
Well,
Once again,
we'll
it's
be
a
live
second
to
driver.
tape. We'll be live to tape.
Okay.
But
If that worked, cool.
But this is like you said, it's a very complex issue.
Yep.
And it does take empathy, but it also takes money, but it takes jobs too. I mean, as a child growing up, we had our parents that gave us that support. That how to say it? They pushed you forward all the time, right? So when you get in a stage where you're in addictions, in a bad place, you need that somebody to drive behind you and encourage you to be the best that you can be, right?
And honestly, I think a lot of this has come from the residential school tragedy.
Okay, so there's a lot of people you're saying that are homeless right now.
Yep, over 90% of my members at Lodge 137
are First Nations.
Identified as First Nations, Indigenous, or Métis.
Okay.
And to me, that is a systematic issue where so many people had trauma from residential schools, Indian day schools, the 60s scoop. And so when you say you need the support of the families were divided.
Right.
Children were divided. And there's all this post-traumatic stress that was generational. And I witnessed that because I volunteered to help people with their applications for Indian day schools and residential schools. And the stories were just horrendous. And unfortunately, they had to relive those stories in a narrative in order to be able to be compensated. And yet, sometimes there were 3 generations of families that experiencing homelessness.
Wow.
And the urban Indigenous are really suffering.
So breaking that chain is a challenge for some of them, right?
Yep.
I mean, my coach, my hockey coach, was First Nations. My first girl was First Nations. I mean, there's people who broke that chain at a very early time when this was all happening, but others had a more difficult time, and I don't know why that is. That's something I don't understand as of yet.
Well, it all depends on the support network. I think the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, even though they had all of these calls to action, so few of them have been implemented. I don't know that it's been taken seriously, but if you actually see the detrimental impacts of how this affected especially this community, and I also believe we have so many Indigenous communities that surround Sault Ste. Marie. It's not surprising that we're number 1 in opioid deaths in the first 2 quarters of 2024 in Ontario per capita.
That's tough.
It's ridiculous, the number of people who are dying. I've lost so many members of Lodge 137.
Now, a topic we didn't touch on is human trafficking, and again I attended last year a human trafficking information session on a First Nations territory, and the research in the Algoma district was somewhere along the way of 4 dozen plus people were trafficked.
So not surprising at all, and obviously dealing with members of Lodge 137, I heard a lot of the stories. A lot of the human trafficking and sex trafficking came from the city or from Michigan through the city to Toronto, Montreal.
Whoa. But
also when someone has drug debt, if you look at the kind of the phases of owing, so if you owed $100 or $500 or higher, kind of your punishment gets worse and worse. And one of the punishments is often being abducted, held against your will, drugged, and used as a forced prostitute.
Oh, goodness.
So that could happen here in Sault Ste. Marie, or they're transporting, I heard they're sending people in sea cans, they're sending them in vans, they're it's really disgusting what's happening kind of underground here in this city. And unfortunately, there's also this, this isn't just people on the lower socioeconomic status. This is happening with people in positions of power who are either running or involved or benefiting in some way from these services. And honestly, there's a lot of cleanup that has to be done.
That's disgusting.
It is disgusting, but if you look in every community,
it exists.
It exists.
Right.
There is kind of what we see on the surface. There's the underground, awful, disgusting world that's going on, and then there's those who kind of get out of it and get well and healthy. And when we ran the lodge, our goal was simply to allow people the opportunity to take steps to heal. And healing, because we're never going to get rid of all the drug dealers in the world, right?
No,
we're never going to get rid of all the drugs,
right.
whether it's fentanyl or something else. Fentanyl, infiltrated into Canada through the U.S., through the Mexican cartel, originally from China. All the raw materials were, being encouraged to be sold from China. And now Canada's even producing synthetic fentanyl and shipping it in other places in the world. So, it's a real problem that's never going to go away. So the only way in my mind to get people well is to kind of embrace them, allow them the opportunity to feel safe, establish trust and rapport, and provide them the options for when they're ready. So forced treatment never works, or rarely ever works.
And that was something that was being discussed right now, I believe.
Oh my goodness.
So as to remove a person from their encampment and perhaps...
What, they want to arrest them and put them in a drug treatment facility? Do they really, honestly, if they think that works, they are very uneducated.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. Well, if you want to offer people the opportunity, but you can't tell me you're going to arrest people and force them into treatment when there is not a treatment facility at all in Sault Ste. Marie right now.
It's against the Constitution, too.
Well, of course. And as far as there was a Supreme Court decision that said you can't evict people from encampments unless you have the option of other housing. But when it comes to treatment, obviously people who are being forced into treatment, that is so inhumane and unconstitutional. I simply can't wrap my head around it. But it's because the mayors, the municipalities, all the leaders, they're tired of this issue. But you need to invest in the things that work, which are drop-in centers, treatment facilities, and supportive housing. Those are the three things that are going to work. Drop-in centers, treatment facilities, and supportive housing. And that's the only way that we're going to get out of this, and it's going to take millions and billions of dollars across Canada, Ontario, and Sault Ste. Marie to fix this, but that's the only way.
And that's the only way.
That's the only way.
Well, it's going to take a community to change it, actually.
Oh, for sure. You're right. It isn't just...
You can't just throw money at it. It's got to be a full-on community support behind it.
But you realize stigma.
That would mean eliminating the criminal element.
Right.
Right? And no matter how high it reaches.
Right. And honestly, though, there's legislation that says we can't drink a beer on the sidewalk. But there is no legislation that says we can't be under the influence of drugs on the sidewalk. In the olden days, we can arrest someone intoxicated stumbling if you're in a public place. We can't do that right now because there's no legislation that exists. Probably that needs to change. I'm not all for just let people, be all over the place. But understand that even if you arrested people, they're just going to be released on a promise to appear in court a couple months down the line. It's going to clog up our court system. We need to have a treatment facility in Sault Ste. Marie, drug treatment court, that if someone is arrested for any offense related to drugs that is not considered violent, that can put them through a system that will give them options and say, listen, you can go to jail if you want, or here's another option for you.
Right.
But lots of things have to change, and it's almost like the government just said, whoa, I don't know where this problem came from. This has been coming for a long time. The opioid crisis is sweeping North America. This is not just a Sault Ste. Marie problem. So if anyone says, oh, I'm moving out of the city, it's so bad, guess what? It's everywhere. Doesn't matter where you go, it's everywhere. But together, if everyone kind of does their part to really control that stigma, if we are constantly putting people down, ostracizing people, treating people less than you or I, because they happen to be addicted to a substance that has just awful ramifications in their life. There's many people who are addicted to alcohol, to all other forms of drugs, to everything else on the list, who are managing to function in society, but opioids is a beast. And it's a beast that is not going to be solved by ostracizing people and putting people down. So that's where I'm at.
It's a tough, I don't know. Ultimately, people have to make their own choices.
That's right.
Ultimately, right?
Yeah.
You got to want to get out of the mess
Yep.
they're in, right?
Yep.
And it's not like the community doesn't have the resources. They do. They do lack the beds for the amount of people that are
Yep.
right now down and out. I get that. But, I mean, incrementally, hopefully that will change over time.
Hopefully.
With your hard work.
Oh, well,
And
we're just in an educating and advocating mode at this point because, and obviously I'm running the supportive housing, but really I'd love to be doing the drop-in center. And I'd love the city of Sault Ste. Marie to make the same commitment to ending this issue in the city in the way that Sudbury has. Their goal is to end homelessness by 2030, and they've been investing municipal funds in addition to provincial and federal funds. So I would really like to see that.
Oh, that'd
here.
be nice. Yeah, they made.
Yeah, we can't just wait around
They
for
made a
the government to
commitment,
come in with a purse of
and
money.
they got a plan.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
for
right.
2030, where are we? 24, 25 is around the
Almost
corner.
25.
Oh,
That's
my
right.
Lord.
Well, thank you so much for this really innovative, completely cool new platform.
See, this is
You're
you.
awesome.
That's you there.
Oh, there I am.
Yeah.
Oh my! I hope it works. I'll look forward to watching it and sharing it with everyone.
Thank you for doing part 2.
Part 2. That's right.
Part
we did
2.
a trial run and a real part, and let's hope this real part
It
works.
says it's live, so there you go, folks.
All right. Okay.
Julie Hryniewicz, she's an advocate. She's working hard, tirelessly in the community to help others. If you see her out there in the streets, give her a shout out, shake her hand, and if you have any ideas that you want to convey to her, don't hesitate.
Yeah,
How could they reach you if somebody wants to reach you?
So
Maybe an
Facebook, email juliehryniewicz@gmail.com.
but mostly Lodge 137. On
Yeah,
Facebook.
you can look up Lodge 137, exactly.
Right.
And that's 137 is in the number.
Right.
Thank you so much, Rick,
Thank you.
from wlctv.ca.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning
Exciting.
in. That's it. That's all. We're going to call it a day. And we'll see you.
Okay.
Thanks for watching.